Hello and welcome. My name is Teresa, and if you're new here, this is where we transform birth trauma into triumph. Today, I want to tell you all about my first very traumatic birth with my first son. The only video I have talking about this is one that I recorded very shortly after giving birth. And now that 4.5 years have passed, I have a lot more insights. I did a lot more healing about 2 years ago, and I never recorded all of my findings in one place. So here we go. Let's talk about my transformation from maiden to mother, really my catapult into everything that I do now. 4.5 years ago, I became pregnant with my first baby. I'm shocked. I'm excited, I'm nervous, surprised, most of all, just so joyful. Getting pregnant was very easy for us, easier than we even expected. And I'm just overjoyed that after all the years of waiting, I finally get to become a mother. My early pregnancy is great, pretty much uneventful. I have some nausea, but nothing horrible. I mostly just feel great. I feel tired, of course, like most first trimester mamas, but I'm a maiden. I don't have anybody else to take care of. Getting my rest is pretty easy. And I breeze through the first weeks very easily. It's a very joyful time. Given my family history, which is the subject for a whole nother video, and there's so much to unpack there. So if you would like to know more about that, leave me a comment down below and I'll consider talking more about that. But in a nutshell, I've been exposed to hospitals extensively throughout my childhood and adolescent years. And given that, I know from the very get-go that I will not bring a child into this world in a hospital. That just goes against everything that I know about those places that I got to experience firsthand, and also just against common sense. And if you know me in real life, I am the queen of common sense. And if something does not add up common sense wise, I always look at it more closely because I trust common sense and that there's something there. And hospitals are where people go to die. And so why would I, a completely healthy woman, birth a completely healthy baby in a place where people go to die or where they're horribly sick? So from the very beginning, I know that I want a home birth. We live in the US at the time. We had just moved from New York City. COVID is in full swing. And I also know that different states look at home birth differently, and not every state is as home birth friendly as I would like. And so at the time, my husband and I renovated a few travel trailers. We were even living in one. It looked like this beautiful apartment. We were so excited to be taking a break from New York City, and we make the decision to interview midwives in the few different areas that we considered parking in and then eventually moving into a house in, because I did not want to birth in an RV, even though it was so beautiful, and I did not want to live with a newborn in an RV. But for the moment, we are mobile, and so we have the luxury of being able to travel around and talk to different midwives in different places. Well, the midwife that we like best happens to be in Texas, and we end up moving there primarily to be able to receive care from her. She is a lovely woman, has a lovely office. She's slightly older, but not too much. She is beautiful. She has a wonderful, gentle way about her. We interview her several times. I ask all the questions. I ask about going beyond 42 weeks. I ask about transfers. I ask all the questions that I know to ask at the time. And we both love her. And we decide that she is the one. We start care with her sometime around 12 weeks, I believe. We definitely had all the interviews before that. I can't remember exactly when we started seeing her for appointments, but from the get-go, I reject pretty much almost everything. She does insist on using the Doppler, even though I am not thrilled about that, and I prefer the fetoscope because Dopplers are just another form of ultrasound, and actually the waves that a Doppler emits can be more dangerous to a baby than even ultrasound waves. More on that in another video. But she still insists on using it on a few visits, but not every visit, and she does use the fetoscope on majority of my visits to her. At 20 weeks, she does insist on an ultrasound. I would prefer not to have any ultrasounds at all, but I decide that I guess I'm fine with one, and we're pretty set on finding out the gender of our baby. We thought we had an idea of what it might be, and we just wanted to know, not knowing any better at the time, and that was just a thing people did. People found out their gender and had this whole gender reveal, which we did not do. We go in for our ultrasound. Everything's completely normal, of course, and we find out that we're having a little baby boy, which actually brings with it some gender disappointment. And looking back, it's one of the first things that I had to work through that were a direct result of birthing within the system. Even though I thought I was being this rebel and choosing the unbeaten path and birthing at home, where I'm from, home birth was still illegal at that time. It only became legalized in 2024, which is last year, which is crazy. Everybody back home is just so terrified that I'm going to be birthing at home. And so for the context that I'm from, even this decision alone is very controversial. But I did not expect that I'd be having a baby boy. I thought I'd be having a baby girl. And there are feelings that come up that I have to work through. And if you'd like to know more about my thoughts on finding out the gender disappointment, let me know in the comments below, because I think I'm pretty interested in making a whole video on that. I do believe that if we were supposed to see inside the uterus, it would have a window in it for us to see inside. And I cannot even explain in this short a time frame the difference between my first birth having known the gender and my second birth not knowing anything. But more on that in a future video. The rest of my pregnancy is completely uneventful and boring. I feel great. I grow this big old belly, which is where I first learned that I grow big bellies. I have a pretty short torso, and my baby bellies definitely get really large. But that's it. It was a completely normal pregnancy. Absolutely nothing to report. I was active throughout the whole thing. I was working out every day and walking and shooting YouTube videos on a completely different topic or in a completely different style than now. I was somebody completely different. And just enjoying time with my husband, making our little rental house feel like home, and preparing the best I knew how for this transition from maiden to mother. I was doing a lot of research and educating myself on the type of choices that I wanted to make, what I wanted for my baby, what I didn't want for my baby and me. And I felt really good. I felt like I was very prepared. I knew all the things that I was going to decline, and I was choosing to trust my chosen professional. And looking back, the one area that I massively underestimated was my mindset. I worked on all the external things. We took some birth classes and we prepared everything and we did the research and all of that. But what I failed to prepare, quite frankly, I didn't know that I should be preparing, is my mindset. And I really wish, and that's gonna be the theme throughout this entire video, is I wish my midwife was really the woman that I hired her to be, which is an elder wise woman, a woman who's gone before me, who's had 3 home births herself, who has seen hundreds of births, and who would be like the guiding mother, the guiding elder woman in a community, and who would take my hand and guide me through this transition. And part of that would be speaking to me about the mindset that's required for birth, because I did not do a whole lot of preparation for that. I didn't know how to, I didn't know what to expect. I was trying to put my best foot forward and my best thoughts about this whole process forward, but I did not realize quite how lonely birth is, and that actually nobody can help me, but more on that later. So at around 41 weeks and 5 days-ish, my midwife starts getting antsy, which is interesting because I definitely covered with her the question of what happens if I go past 42 weeks. Will you cease care? And she said, no, we will sign a little disclaimer or whatever she called it, and we'll just wait for baby to be born, which I thought fantastic. So it kind of took me by surprise that at 41 plus 4 or 5, not even at 42, she is getting nervous and she requests a second ultrasound. And that really should have been one of the first big warning signs that I should have seen, because I was not in labor. I was still very with it, and I was actually pretty annoyed that she's asking me to do this. I remember the conversation with my husband. We're driving in the car on the way to the place, and we were both annoyed that we had to do this. I felt completely fine. The baby was great. Everything was just just completely normal, and we did not see the reason why we need to do this. But she told us that if we did this and we checked for amniotic fluid levels, we would then sign this paper that we accept all responsibility for all outcomes, and she would let us go until baby was born. So we thought, okay, fine, we'll give her this, we'll do this just to check. Then we can go back to just waiting patiently for our baby. And I was very ready to go at least till 43 weeks based on all my research. This was nothing that scared me. All the research and claims that I had seen about the risks of going past 42 weeks sounded like complete bogus to me. And I just did not have any doubts in my mind about this whatsoever. Obviously, we passed the ultrasound with flying colors. Amniotic fluid levels are great. Baby's great. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. He's head down, like all the things. So we're like, okay, great. This passed. We are signing this paper and we'll be in touch when I'm in labor. Micah's birthday comes that we celebrate. I remember, I think it was a Monday that year, and which happened to be 42 plus 1 for me. And then, lo and behold, 42 plus 2, here's my midwife again, checking in and strongly suggesting that I take midwife's brew. And this is really where things start to shift. And that constant checking and nagging and me being passed and all my relatives texting constantly to check and nobody in recent history having heard of somebody going past 42 weeks and the whole medical community that I just somehow happened to be part of back home being on their toes and pressuring my family members to pressure me. And, you know, I have, through the process of healing after my first birth, gone through what I call my radical responsibility transformation. And I've looked back at my births, both of my births, but especially my first one, to see what specifically I need to take full responsibility for and what things were truly done to me. And there are points in my story where I 100% take responsibility for the wrong choices that I made. I also think that there's a lot of context to them, and I have a lot of empathy for the woman that I was back then and the choices that I was making because I simply did not know any better. And I think I knew so much more than the majority of first-time mothers. I was definitely prepared for this quote unquote unusual path, which I don't actually think is unusual at all, but for the context of where I was coming from it. But there just came things that I was not fully armed against. And the main part was that I had hired this woman to be my guide, my protector, and I paid her money because I wanted her to guide me. And so if she was guiding me to do something and I was constantly resisting, then how could she even be doing her work? And at some point, I just decided that, okay, well, I hired this woman, I trust this woman, and she's telling me this, so it might be time to listen to her. And that is where the beginning of the end starts. And that is where my physiological birth is disrupted and where I believe the biggest mistake occurred that shifted and changed the entire trajectory of my life. I'm definitely approaching the portal at this point. I am, way past 42 weeks. I am convinced if I had waited another 2 or 3 days, my son would be born and everything would probably be different in my life. But she just could not take it any longer. And as I was approaching my time of birth more and more, my mind started shifting and becoming more malleable and softer. And now, retrospectively, also looking at this through the lens of my second birth, this has to occur because you do have to get in a very specific headspace and a very soft existence, at least for me, in order to allow birth to happen and for the baby to come through you. And I was already in this headspace and I found it so emotionally challenging to constantly be holding up to this pressure from her and from everybody else. And so in the end, I caved and I agreed. My context for this decision was all the horror stories of hospital inductions that I'd known, and I knew I would never allow this. So in comparison to hospital induction, drinking midwife's brew to me seemed completely harmless. Not to mention that I have a family member who drank it and had wonderful results, had a baby within a couple hours of drinking it. All the home birth groups I was in, this was completely normalized. And I did not go this deep. I did not red pill myself this deep to realize that taking midwife's brew is actually an intervention, and it can kick off the cascade of interventions that lead to a horrible birth outcome. I also did not realize that midwife's brew-induced contractions are so much more powerful than natural contractions. But I jump ahead. So I drink, if you're not familiar with the midwife's brew, it's a mixture of castor oil and some other ingredients. Who knows how anybody ever came up with this recipe? It's absolutely disgusting, by the way, and it ruined sparkling wine or champagne for me for many years. And to this day, I'm now miraculously, of course, after my second birth, this part of me got healed. It's still not my favorite, but I don't have an issue drinking it. At the time I did. I just could not touch it for years because you mix castor oil with some sparkling wine, with some peach juice, I think, and some essential oils, and you drink that, and then you wait 2 hours or 3 hours, and then you drink it again, and essentially it just obviously gives you such bad diarrhea and creates so much activity in your digestive tract that this stimulates uterine contractions, along with some other properties that castor oil supposedly has, which I don't know a whole lot about, except that I do know that the contractions that it brings about are more similar to Pitocin-induced contractions than they are to natural birth contractions. And so I do have to drink all 3 rounds. My body and my baby, they're not completely ready to be birthed yet, and they do require push, which is just, once again, looking back, so unnecessary and just retarded. Why not just wait the few more days? Nobody's ever been pregnant forever. This baby is coming out. Whether we want it or don't, it is coming out. Why did we not just wait? That afternoon, I'm laying on the couch with my husband, watching something and doing some of the prep that the midwives told me about. Now that I'm remembering it, they suggested to pick some funny shows that we would watch in early labor to help the time pass. I mean, I've never heard something more idiotic. You're gonna lay on the couch and no, this is just, no. This, at least for me, this does not work. With my first birth, there was no early labor because of the midwife's brew. And my second birth, yes, there was, but obviously what you want to do is you want to do something. You want to keep moving your body. You do not want to be static. You don't want to be laying on the couch. Not only is it not comfortable, but you do want to engage in active movement to help your body and your baby be best prepared for labor. Also, it's really good to give your body and your mind something to work on. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy and you're actually going to make your labor so much harder and longer because you're focusing on it too much. But I digress again. This is something for another video. I'm laying on the couch and my waters break and they come out with a big gush, all clear and perfect. And so I call my midwives and they're so happy and so relieved, and they ask us to call them when they start to pick up. Well, my husband decides that he's going to run to the store and pick up some more essentials that we need before everything really gets going. The midwives also give him a list of things because now my waters are broken and we're on the clock and there's potential for infection. And I'm not dissing any of this, but seriously, in a home environment, without poking and prodding things that do not belong in your private parts, if you just don't do that, what are the odds? The odds are so low if you're in your home environment that you are going to get an infection just because your waters are broken. Well, by the time he comes back, I'm in active labor. Things went from 0 to 100 so fast, and I am having trouble keeping up. In retrospect, well, I blamed myself for a long time for just not being strong enough. But then when I experienced actual undisturbed birth with my second, I have so much empathy for me. My second birth was nothing like this. I had so much time to prepare my mind, to integrate, to really adjust. And I don't mean like days, but I had hours and hours to really put myself in the headspace I needed to be in. Whereas here, I'm a maiden. I don't know what a contraction feels like. Suddenly, I definitely know what a contraction feels like. And they're coming like tidal waves without any break. We think we're going to have baby any moment, really, because everything is so strong. My husband gets back. We realize that the midwives forgot to give us the pump to the birthing pool. So he blows it up using his mouth, almost passes out. I still remember at this point I was able to laugh between contractions. I'm sitting on our bedroom floor watching him in the living room do this and laughing in between contractions. The midwives arrive a few hours later. And it's all so strange looking back. They bring their oxygen tanks and all of their stuff, and they're being so quiet, so like trying to not disturb my space, except they've already completely disturbed it by making me drink castor oil. And I don't mean like a tablespoon. I drank at least a full glass by the end. So they've already done all the damage, and here they are tiptoeing around my house, pretending to just blend in with the furniture. They camp in the office while we're trying to figure out what to even do with me. I am having trouble working through the contractions, and I think that throughout the entire process, my husband and I both imagined that the midwives would be a lot more hands-on. And I think this might have just been a miscommunication in the expectations, but we feel a little deserted. They are out in the office. They just come in, what feels like constantly, to be honest, but just to listen to the fetal tones, and then they go back and they're chatting in there, and we're like, okay, well, that's weird. We're just gonna try and figure it out over here. This is definitely a point where I should take more responsibility, because I guess I should have been more prepared to birth alone with my husband, and not had this image in my mind that the midwives are gonna come and they're gonna help me figure this out and we're gonna do it together, which is what I had in my mind. And that's definitely on me, because birth is extremely lonely. Birth is the loneliest thing you can ever do. And even when they cut the baby out of your body, nobody can really help you. And even that act doesn't really help you. You have to do it yourself. It's like working out. Nobody can work out for you. If you want to be fit, you have to do your own workout. You can't have somebody else work out for you and you get the muscles and the toned body that you like. It just doesn't work that way. And it's the same for birth. One of the midwives comes and shows my husband how to do some hip squeezes, and they show some positions. The hip squeezes work somewhat, as does the warm water in the pool that I get into. But retrospectively, looking back, I'm actually not a huge fan of either one of those things. I did feel a lot of relief when he squeezed my hips, but I birthed for a long time. I was laboring for 24 plus hours, and my poor husband obviously got very tired. And even the birthing pool, there comes a time where you have to get out of it. And so when those helpful things stop, and they have to stop at some point, you are hit with this even harder, stronger wave of birth sensations. And going from having some relief to them having full blown, it's not good. It's very difficult, but at least for me, it chinked at my mindset a little bit, because I just longed for something to take the pain away, instead of knowing that this is what it is, and the only person who can make it quote unquote go away is me, by working through it. And that actually, the more I surrender to it, the more I soften, the more I give in, the faster and easier I can flow through. And that fighting and trying to find ways to make this less horrible actually works against me in the long run. And I didn't understand any of this, and I'm not sure that there was a way for anybody to help me understand this before having my second birth. The following 12 hours are a complete blur. I don't remember most of it. I'm moving between the pool and the toilet and my bedroom and the birthing ball. I do finally get into this state on the birthing ball where I'm kind of falling asleep, and between each contraction, I sit up, I have a contraction, and then I lay on my bed with my head down, and I sleep for however long I have in between. And actually, that is something that I did very similarly in my second birth also. And it is when I get into this state with my second birth, I actually have no idea in my first birth, but in my second birth, when I get into this state is when I made the most progress. And I do think this is the state of release and just complete surrender. And maybe each maiden has to walk that path of resistance and fighting and trying to find a way to ease her burden, to then just accepting her burden and working through it. I'm just thinking as I go on these topics here. I thought about a lot of it, but there's just so many nuances and details, and some of the details of my first birth still carry a pretty strong emotional charge and make me emotional sometimes and teary-eyed and sad. So every time that I talk through it, I find something new. Sometime during the night, I am brought onto the birthing stool. And in my opinion, if my birth hadn't been sabotaged up until now, let's say we took the midwife's brew, but we would have been able to somehow recover. This is the point where I break a little bit. They bring me onto the birthing stool and I'm coached to push without having any pushing sensations whatsoever. In fact, when I would read birth stories after and women would say, I felt very pushy in this moment, I never knew what they meant because I never felt that. I never felt that urge to like bear down that I then got to experience in my second birth. And I'm coached to push and they're telling me how to push and they're all up in my business. And looking back, I don't think I would even be able to pass a stool in front of all these people there, looking up everywhere and being so close to me, not even to mention birthing a baby. I just, now, knowing what I know now, this was the completely wrong setup. Not only should you not coach a birthing woman to push, obviously, but for me and my personality, I cannot have this whole big audience. I am private. I need to be left in private to do these things. People can't be up in my face so much. And so I am coached to push for about 3 hours. And I'm told I'm not doing it right and that I'm doing the breathing wrong and I'm not bearing down enough and I'm not pushing strong enough. And this breaks me because I'm so tired. It's the middle of the night. I hadn't slept. I've been birthing or laboring for 10 plus hours already, and I am told I don't know how to do it all the time. And my mindset begins to massively shift downwards at this point. I feel defeated. I feel like we should be having baby now already. And they're telling me things like, don't you want to meet your baby? Don't you want to hold your baby now? Well, yes, obviously, I want to hold my baby. More than anything else, how dare you say that? Yes, of course, but we are not ready to do that. Interestingly enough, I had a friend who was also with the same midwife who had her baby about a week after me, and her birth ticked all of the boxes, and yet she was also coached to push by this same midwife and was so exhausted from the coached pushing that she couldn't even hold her baby. This isn't a home birth, completely normal home birth with no complications and everything by the book. And she was so exhausted from the coach pushing that she couldn't hold him. She felt unwell. Pelvic floor recovery was horrible for her. And to my shock, she hired that midwife again for her second birth, but this was her stipulation, that she did not want to be coached anymore. Horrible. I really do not understand how people can argue for midwives in the context of mother-baby versus midwife. But I digress. My body is tired. My contractions start spacing out apart. I'm tired. They give me an IV with fluids. I don't really know why. It feels weird in a home setting. It's another intervention, mostly for the mindset, because I am starting to lose my power. My power is leaking out. I couldn't do the pushing. Now I need an IV. This is not going well in my mind. I am tired. I'm very tired. And at that time, I did not know that it is actually normal sometimes for contractions to stop or pause because you are tired and your body is so beautifully designed to give you a break when you're really tired. My baby's still doing great. They're still monitoring him around the clock, which is also very disruptive when you're trying to focus on having a baby. Somebody constantly every 15 minutes or so coming up to you and listening all the time. And then we begin to see light of dawn. The second midwife shows up, who I only met once briefly, and I wasn't really given a choice with her. She seemed fine to me. And that's perhaps another area that I should have been more proactive about. I should have probably probed into her a lot more. I did not understand what a key role the second midwife would play in my birth. And she comes in, she does an exam, she consults with my midwife, and she says that we should transfer. My baby has what they call a caput. I always mispronounce this word, which at the time sounds so scary to me. They tell me his head is swelling and he is not doing so well, even though his heart rate and all the rest is still fine. They also mentioned something about labor not progressing, baby not moving down. He hasn't really entered my birth canal at all. It seems like his head is wedged to the side and he is not making the moves he's supposed to. And to my shock, my midwife just completely caves. It seems as if she was somehow subordinate to the second midwife, although I'm not sure how. And she just says, all right, it's time for us to transfer. And I try to fight. I try to fight with some of the arguments that I have. We don't have health insurance at the moment. We don't have a bag packed. We did not want this. We do not want to go anywhere. And yet I'm persuaded to go. Probably could have fought harder. I was also 24 hours into laboring at this point, and I was a maiden. And the person I hired to support me and protect me, I believed, was doing just that. And so we get into our pickup truck and we drive to the hospital. It is the most painful and difficult drive I've ever had to done. I 100% do not recommend driving at 10 centimeters dilated and effaced, fully effaced. Interestingly enough, I did end up being in a car for some part of my labor second time round also, but that was my own choice and I did it completely differently than this time. But we drive to the hospital. I remember I called my mom from the car on FaceTime, telling her, and it feels as if my entire world in that moment is taking a breath of relief. My whole extended circle and everybody else, even though I didn't tell any of them, but my mom definitely breathed a breath of relief. Finally, they're going to the hospital. It's going to be better that way. Not knowing that that moment is completely going to shatter me for so many years to come. And interestingly enough, after everything's said and done, which I haven't gone through yet, my midwife did say that we could have done some other maneuvers at home, inversions and other maneuvers to help the baby dislodge from the pelvis and then come down again, which would have probably helped labor come along. But she said that would have been so difficult. Can you imagine doing that with the contractions? And at the time, I just kind of nodded along, but knowing everything that had happened to me later and how horrendous that was, doing an inversion for 5 minutes would have definitely not been harder than everything I was put through later. So we arrive at the hospital. I'm wheeled into a room. Everything's great. The midwife takes care of everything. We don't have to talk to anybody. Ultimately, also remembering back, one of the last straws to transferring is they tell me, wouldn't you want to rest a little bit? Wouldn't you want to get a little bit of sleep? And of course, I had been laboring for 24 hours now. I hadn't slept all night long. And of course, the thing I want more than anything else in that moment is to sleep. But that is talk from the devil telling me that was so not helpful. Instead, they should have helped my mindset. Said, you are strong. You can do hard things. But their certification wouldn't allow them to do that because as board certified midwives, they have a specific protocol to follow. And my birth started deviating from it in a way that made them uncomfortable. And certified midwives, most of the time, will not go against their certification. They will not go against the body that granted them their certification and hence their livelihood, because they will not give all of that up because of one woman, one birth, and one baby, even though for that woman in that moment, it is the birth, and she is the woman, and is the baby. Very big distinction and viewpoints. But it's safer to follow protocol and not go to jail. I get it, which is probably why you shouldn't be certified. But that's a whole nother topic for further discussion. I have a lot to say about birth. What can I say? So we get to the hospital, and I get that promised epidural, which kind of works, not fully. I get a little button that I press anytime my contraction is just a little bit too strong and I don't want to hear it, I don't want to feel it. I just press a button and me and my baby get shot up with just a little bit more fentanyl so that I don't have to feel my transition into motherhood. And I even say to my husband in that moment, this button is everything that's wrong with society nowadays, because when you feel discomfort, you just press the button and it goes away. You are not put through any kind of initiation whatsoever. And I had worked through it for many hours at home, and it felt wrong to me. Even though I loved the rest, it felt wrong to be stripped of the sensations that come with the process that I'm going through. And so I sleep for some time, Once again, like so unnatural to sleep for hours in the middle of a labor. And then they bring this peanut ball and they try to get me to push again. And even though I feel even less sensation than before, obviously. And at this point, I am tired. I am numb. I can't move from my bed now. I have a catheter, obviously, and there is no movement forward. There's blaring lights. There's nurses walking in and out constantly. I'm strapped to 1,000 different monitors. If my birth was too disturbed to work properly at home, it is 1,000% disturbed in this hospital room. And so sometime later, a surgeon comes in and delivers the worst news to me that I could imagine. We are going to do a C-section. And my whole world comes crashing. My worst nightmare is playing out in front of my eyes. And I hear you, critics. Well, I obviously would prefer a healthy baby to a dead baby. But I also think the bar should be so much higher up for normal, uncomplicated births and pregnancies like mine. The type of woman that I was and the type of birth that I had should not have ended in trauma and scarring and in the determination to never birth again. As a civilized first world society, we should really aim for higher standards than, you have a healthy baby, yay! Everything must be fine. And so I'm wheeled off to the OR, devastated. And everything moves very quickly. I'm all prepped, you see, because I've already been admitted. And everything's already been poked and probbed. So the transition to surgery is shockingly fast. They cut me open. They get my son out. He's crying. He is upset. He is so unlike the birth of my second son, where he was born just so peaceful. And at that point, I started feeling so unwell that I can't even hold my son. I can't hold him. I can't do anything. All the first moments that I had imagined for so long are stolen from me. They're completely different than what I had imagined. I know so many people who kind of view this reflection on birth trauma as some sort of spoiledness or just being extra or being emotional or unnecessary. And I disagree with this so fundamentally because we birth how we live and we live how we birth. And birth is really at the apex of everything. It is how we birth our babies and that we birth our babies is at the very core of our society. Without this, we will die. And we are seeing this play out in real time. Birth rates are declining massively. Women do not want to birth babies, partially due to this rhetoric of trauma that is carried down from generation to generation that never gets healed. And even women who walk away without any trauma, so to speak, so many of them have completely circumvented the rite of passage that would have been their biggest transformation and their biggest catalyst in the name of modern medicine. And this shapes everything because the way my son was born shaped the connection I had with him and the connection I had with myself as a mother, gave me so many doubts, made me want to never have any more children again. And to this day, I see a difference in the connection that I have with him versus my second son. Although I obviously work on it and we do all sorts of different things, there is a difference. You can see it and sense it, and this impacts people for the rest of their lives, both the mothers and the children. And so this matters. And so my son doesn't get my attention after birth because I feel so unwell. I start vomiting. They start performing, I think, what's called the funnel massage, which is the most violent thing that's ever been done to me. They were pouncing on my body and my belly so hard that my whole entire body was flinging itself up and down on the operating table. They kind of had to hold me down so that I wouldn't fall off. Apparently, they had some trouble getting my uterus to come back down so they could close it. Well, yeah, they gave me so much Pitocin once I got my epidural that actually my contractions completely stopped at a certain point, and my uterus was so exhausted that it just wasn't working anymore. And interestingly enough, a family member consulted this with a well-renowned OBGYN in the place where I'm from, and he said that if this would happen in his hospital, he would have just extracted my uterus and left me without one. So sorry, no more babies for you, because we just gave you so much pit that couldn't handle it and couldn't sew it back together. But back to the operating table. I guess they administered some more drugs. I'm not entirely sure, but I started vomiting a lot through all of this, and in the end, lose consciousness. I just remember that my brain, I was playing these stories in my brain, and then suddenly my brain just told me, this is too much. We're gonna go to sleep. It's a little bit too much. And I think my body was protecting me. My brain was protecting me. And I dreamt of walking on the beach in the sand with my husband and my son, and everything being fine, and the waves just washing our feet, and we're laughing, and he's running, and we're living this beautiful, wonderful, sun-drenched life. And it was in those moments when my husband was terrified for my life. He was convinced he was going to lose me. In those moments, he says that the atmosphere in the operating room got extremely tense, and things were not looking so good for a little while. But they get everything patched up, and I wake up in the operating room with a blood transfusion and other things that I'm not even aware of, because I want my baby, and my baby gets brought into me very quickly after I ask. He's not there when I wake up, I think. The first few moments I have so much trouble remembering, which is so sad. I think I try to nurse him, and the only reason why I know that is because there's a picture of me doing that, and I'm slowly starting to come to. I'm ecstatic that I have my baby. Nursing and everything works perfectly well, which I'm so grateful for. And I think it's thanks to all those hours of birthing, although I know some women with even scheduled C-sections are able to nurse, which is just such a testament to the resiliency of the female body and babies. And I'm on cloud nine. My son doesn't sleep almost the first entire night. Anytime he is not attached to my breast, he is screaming. So unlike my second baby. Oh my gosh. He is also shaking as a newborn. And at the time, I knew nothing about it. I thought maybe this is a newborn thing. But after he's born, his hands and everything shake. And it wasn't until I had my second son and I saw that he is completely just peaceful and still. And I'm pretty sure it's because of the drugs that were flowing through his little body. What a way to enter life. And so we ride out our time at the hospital, the pain meds, the all around the clock visits in our room from the hospital staff to do random things that we mostly decline. We were held hostage at one point because we obviously refused some more things, and they refused to release my son. Luckily, I'm not in labor anymore. I'm much more capable of fighting for myself, and my husband's there, and he is very determined to protect us. And so we finally go home, and I slowly start to process what happened to me. My midwives come to visit. They're like creeping in the house, trying to not disturb the postpartum home, even though they completely bulldozed it, leveled it with the ground. And it's not until they come, maybe first, second time, and they refer to my birth as a belly birth. And that's when some of my alarm bells finally start going off, because I am just shocked by the notion that they have a specific term for this. That means this happens often. Belly birth. And it also just sounds so disgusting to me. This was no birth, really. It was, but it wasn't. And I know that even at the time, even 2 days postpartum, while I'm in so much pain, unable to move, unable to hold my baby, having to figure out alternative positions on how to nurse my baby because I can't hold him across my belly. I try to examine my scar in the bathroom, and I faint because there's just so much sensation. It's not even from pain itself. It's just this overcoming sensation. What I interpret as just the trauma, the seat of the trauma. And I do not touch my scar for several years after that. And it's not until several years later that I'm finally in a position where I can start debunking everything, one lie at a time, to figure out what happened to me. And I start with unnecessary ultrasounds, the unnecessary fear of going past 42 weeks because of placental deterioration. Well, I didn't show any signs of that. I felt great. Baby felt great. He was moving great. Everything was great. And so really it is that lack of patience that is displayed time and time again inside the medical system that really was the culprit. But continuing on with that, my contractions were unnatural from the beginning because of the castor oil. And that is why I had much harder time, why it was so much more exhausting, and why I probably ran out of energy. Obviously, being coached to push, there's not even any, what can I even say? That is atrocious. Why coach somebody to push? Your body is designed to do the pushing. It's called fetal ejection reflex, that I actually brought up to my midwife later when I was trying to work through this. And she said, you don't want to get to the point where you feel fetal ejection reflex. And to this day, I don't understand what that means, what she meant. Why? Why would you not? I did have that with my second son, and it's great. Your body does the work for you. Your body shows you when it's time to start pushing, and sometimes you don't even have to push at all, or you feel this urge. It feels good to bear down. It feels like the right thing to do in that moment, and your body's almost not giving you choice. It's just saying, this is what we're doing right now. We are bearing down to get this baby out. Whereas I didn't feel any of that in my first birth, and I was forcibly coached to push for so many hours. The fact that my baby had a head or kaput or whatever you want to call it, little swelling, turns out that's completely normal in birth. My second baby's head was a complete cone head when he was born. The fact that we did not do some sort of positioning, nothing. She even talked to me beforehand about the rebozo technique and some other things, and I was just shocked, even while I was in labor, that she just wasn't doing any of that. And even some of my medically minded relatives later said that they had actually come to a very similar conclusion, which is why, even within the practice and without even going to the far-fetched edges of unassisted birth land, why was my midwife not more hands-on? Why did she not adjust me a little more? Why did she not perform that inversion? Certainly nothing can be worse than having a C-section being cut open. I would rather be inverted from my couch or my bed for 5 minutes and have to deal with the contraction through that than to go through what I had to go through. And her consolation was that she's going to braid my hair at the hospital. It just still completely blows my mind. While stalled labor and contractions spacing further apart, I already covered that. And everything that happened at the hospital was inevitable. I ended up having 3 births in one. I went from a home birth to an epidural to a C-section, but once we entered the walls of the hospital, save some sort of miracle of my baby just somehow adjusting and born, there was no other way. And I wonder if she knew that all along, from the time she called for a transfer in my house, if she knew that they were going to do this to me. Because if she wasn't able to birth the baby with me at home, then how else would they do that in the hospital, especially with mobility being so limited and me being bound to my bed, not able to move around, so hence not able to influence the position of my baby. I wonder if she knew. Failed home birth to C-section. I was very broken. My motherhood was hugely impacted. My self-confidence was shot. I felt like if I didn't know how to birth my baby, then how would I know what was good for him, how to do anything else? I was so nervous about it. I let my husband do a lot of it. He was also a very upset little baby. He cried a lot. He had a lot of colic, whatever that is. He would sometimes only stop crying when bounced on the bouncing ball. And I was very disconnected, emotionally traumatized, physically not able to move, not recognizing anything about my body and now my life, because I had transformed from a maid into a mother in a pretty horrendous way and just having so much cognitive dissonance about it. It was a lot to integrate. And so I mostly pushed it aside and I dove headfirst into work, had my husband do a ton of work with the baby, and I just decided that motherhood was not for me and I'm going to dedicate myself to work, and that's where I'm going to find my meaning and my purpose. But you can't keep running forever. And it eventually caught up with me as well. And I went through this process. And what was massively helpful to me was the Free Birth Society podcast and listening to those episodes in my car as I was driving around and realizing that up until that point, I was very married to the narrative of if it wasn't for medical science, me and my baby would have died. I am the 3% of women who needed medical help, who would not be able to have their baby at home. If you want a sampler of that, you can watch my video that I recorded a few days after my son was born, or maybe a few weeks, telling the internet, where I was very active at the time, that this happened and I was saved. My life was saved. And you'll see the brokenness in me at the time. And then hearing these podcast episodes and hearing story after story that was so similar, suddenly things started to fire off in my brain. And suddenly I felt the urge to look into all of the specifics and debunk exactly what had happened. And I realized that I carried a lot of responsibility. I made those choices. I drank the midwife's brew. I picked this midwife. But I also realized that I had been misled on a lot of areas. In some cases, I think unintentionally, but it all comes down to being a servant of two masters. A licensed home birth midwife will not serve you most probably. As a number one, even though you're her paying and vulnerable client, she will serve the certification that she holds because that is how she makes money, and that's her livelihood for her and her family, and for some even a calling. And without that certification, most of them cannot even fathom functioning on, continuing with their practice. And so they follow the rules, even though for you or for a specific mother in a specific moment, the protocol might actually not be the best choice because it is all a generalization. It is not tailor-made. It is not a personal care. And we are individuals, and each case is different, and no two mothers and babies are the same. And we do have different needs, but the bulk nature of a certification does not provide any room for that. And so I realized that even though I thought I was hiring a wise woman to help me, that's not really what I was doing. I was just inviting the medical system into my own home. And she was really not there to help me. She was there to police me and to tick things on her little chart and to watch for deviation from the chart and really be a little watchdog, police dog, just crawling and waiting for me to show signs that would indicate transfer. And when I did, that's what she did. No effort, really, to continue. I guess she had to do effort in her own right, like the forced pushing. I guess that was her trying to help me have a baby at home, but that was obviously not the thing to do. Complete misunderstanding of physiological birth, which I just don't understand how you can aspire to be a home birth midwife and be a practicing home birth midwife and yet have such a deep misunderstanding or be so deeply committed to the catastrophe scenarios that you fail to see the joyful ones. And so I lived as a broken woman for many years until I decided that the only way to heal was to birth again. And my decision to do that really started one night in my bathroom, on my bathroom floor, when I decided to do something pretty epic. And if you'd like to know what that is the perfect video for you to watch next. Thanks so much for watching till now, and I will talk to you next time.